From the Toronto Star, I'm Adrian Cheung, and this matters.
It's going to take a while. We're going to have to be patient until the hard work of tallying the votes is finished. And it ain't over till every vote is counted. Every ballot is counted.
U.S. election night is turning into U.S. election week. And that's not unexpected. Experts warn that it will take time, that tens of millions of mail-in ballots are still being counted. The winner, as of this recording, is undecided. But that's not stopping Donald Trump from doing what he said he would do. For weeks, he made it clear during a speech late on election night that his opponent is no longer Joe Biden. His real opponent is the election itself.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
Again, that's a lie. No winner has been declared. Votes in several battleground states that will decide the election are still being counted. We usually expect a hard conclusion, who won, who lost, immediately after election night. But that's likely not happening until all the votes are counted later this week. So it's all a bit of a mess. Headlines and hot takes are flying around, and we'll try to cut through all of that. We're talking to Ed Keenan, the Toronto Star's Washington bureau chief. We'll sort through what happened on election night, what we can expect in the coming days as we get a better picture of the result, and what Canadians can even make of an election that they have no hand in. Ed, what a night, what a week ahead still to come. I hope you're caffeinated.
Yeah, I got my election week coffee here with me, and I've slept a little bit, a very little bit, and I'm ready to go.
We are recording this interview on Wednesday morning. I know we both had late nights following and reporting on this election, you especially, from outside of the White House. And for weeks, analysts said we would not know a full and final result on election night, and that is exactly what happened. It remains undecided. But as we're talking right now, what do we know about what happened last night?
Well, what we know is that the election is fairly close. Florida, Texas, the biggest states that Trump was expected to win. If Biden won them, it would be some kind of landslide. That didn't happen. And that's why the Americans are now still counting the votes in most of the states that will decide this election, as particularly mail-in ballots have always taken extra time to count. And that's the case especially in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, where the laws prevent them from beginning to count those ballots before Election Day. Most of those ballots came in weeks ago, days ago. In Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, which it's looking more and more like some combination of those states is going to decide the election, they can't start counting until Election Day because they have so many. It's taking quite a long time to count them. They're still counting them. And right now, as we speak, you can't call it for either party, right? On election night, Donald Trump appeared to have a significant lead in some of those places based almost exclusively on the in-person vote from Election Day. But that was expected, right? We've been hearing about the sort of the red mirage and the blue wave for weeks, which would be that Donald Trump's voters were going to show up and vote in person on Election Day. A huge number of Biden voters were expected to vote by mail and in the early vote. And that's what we're seeing in the results. And so it's coming down to the wire. It's going to be close. And so the question now is, do they, as you would expect, go on and count all the ballots, and then we'll see who won? I mean, that's how we think democracy works. Or do we stop counting because one candidate, he likes the totals where they are, so there's no need to count anymore? And that's essentially what, in the middle of the night after election night, at about 3 a.m, I believe, I was losing time, but Donald Trump held a press conference and said, I won, and I'm going to go to the Supreme Court to stop the voting.
We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4:00 in the morning and add them to the list.
And what he's talking about there is stopping the counting of ballots that were legally submitted and cast on or before Election Day. There's just basically no democratic argument to stop counting those ballots. It's a matter of speed, like it's a technicality matter. It has nothing to do with the process. Republican members of Congress immediately started pushing back. We're really in banana republic authoritarian territory there to say, let's stop counting the votes. But where we stand right now is that they're still counting the votes. It's looking very, very close. And we'll find out, sometime Wednesday or Thursday or Friday who's likely to win. We'll see if anybody concedes there. Usually how Americans end the process is that one candidate concedes because they can see the results and they can see that they've lost. If no candidate concedes, essentially the votes get certified by the states at some point in late November, early December, and the Electoral College votes in mid-December. That's when the result is official. There's no official result until then.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the votes are taking longer. But again, this has been said before. Just because it's taking longer, it doesn't mean that the count is not working. You have to count every ballot. And states still will count mail-in ballots when they are postmarked for election day.
It depends. Some states do, some states don't. That has been one of the contentious issues in Pennsylvania. The court fights that happened in advance, one of them was about whether or not ballots received after Election Day, but postmarked before Election Day, should be counted. The Republicans were arguing that the law said they shouldn't. The Supreme Court said, we'll allow 3 extra days. A state like North Carolina allows votes to come in up to a week after Election Day as long as they're postmarked before Election Day. A state like Florida and some of the West Coast states that do a lot of mail balloting have laws that say votes have to be in by Election Day. So it varies from state to state. But yes, in some states, votes could still be arriving. But it's important to note, it's important to emphasize, I think, given some of the misinformation that we're starting to see put forward as essentially propaganda, that all of these votes that they're discussing counting were cast before Election Day.
I wanted to get back to what Trump said in the middle of the night there, of him falsely claiming victory, talking about the Supreme Court, like you just mentioned. We've done an episode on this podcast about this, but hearing that, do you feel like it guarantees that Trump will not concede no matter the results? He's been sort of laying the groundwork, but hearing that, did that confirm it for you?
Well, I mean, I don't think anything's guaranteed. I can't see into the future, but nothing we've ever seen from Donald Trump makes you think that he would go quietly, that he would concede defeat. Even if he concedes the election and steps down, he's going to continue to claim that he won. He always does that. He has a whole conspiracy theory claiming that he won the popular vote in 2016, which he did not, and that it was stolen from him by fraudulent ballots, of which there is no evidence whatsoever. His own inauguration, he wanted to puff up the numbers and all of that. Even when he wins, he still has to claim he was cheated out of an even bigger victory, right? And so I think there's not a scenario I can see, and I could be proven wrong, but there's not a scenario I can see where Trump comes out and says, you know what, looks like I lost fair and square. Congratulations to the new president. I hope you're a good president. I'll be supporting you.
That was never going to happen.
But depending partly maybe on what other members of the Republican Party do or say, or his administration, or the signals he gets from public opinion, he may drop his sort of like legal challenges and all of that. I expect we'll still be hearing him talking about how he was cheated and the Russia hoax and the media against him and all of that for years. But it certainly does signal that his first impulse here and his administration's first impulse huddled around him there in the White House on that night, his campaign, is to fight this out if they can and try to get the vote counts stopped.
We'll be right back. What did you make of Trump mentioning the Supreme Court and saying, in effect, that he will turn this into a legal fight? When you heard that, what was going through your mind?
I don't know. It's hard to see what argument he would make at the Supreme Court. I mean, obviously, he just appointed a new justice there. He's appointed 3 of the 9 members. There's a 6-3 conservative majority on the court. Maybe he thinks that they'd be favorable to him. And a lot of people think that there's such partisanship now on the court that they would be favorable to him, but he didn't offer any legal grounds on which he would be taking this to the Supreme Court. And it's hard to see what the legal grounds would be at this point to disqualify mail ballots or stop counts that are in progress. I think that essentially what he's doing is laying the groundwork to shift public opinion. He's signaling to his supporters, look, I won. Here on election night, look at these numbers I'm pointing at. I won, right? Now they're going to try after election day to change the numbers, and that's an attempt to steal the election. He wants that top line to filter down to his supporters who really trust him on a lot of things.
He wants to set the tone for his base to say, this is it.
Yeah.
Election night was it.
Now, maybe then that's accompanied by a legal strategy that tries to temporarily halt counting while they sort out some or another legal question and run out the clock. But if some of these places are close, like really close, Trump could then demand recounts and continue to litigate which votes should be counted, whether the ones that arrived after election day should be counted, which, to be clear, we don't have any of those votes yet. I mean, the first ones are just arriving now, but we're not talking about that. I think job one in this theory, job one is that the president delegitimizes, gets the idea in his supporters' heads, I won, and anything now that says I didn't win is going to be an after-the-fact attempt to steal the election from me.
It's setting a new reality from which his administration can now work with and talk about the election results in their way.
Yeah. And I think what Biden's team and what a good deal of sort of mainstream political commentators in both parties are doing right now, but, is Biden's message was count all the votes. We feel good about where we are. He didn't declare victory, but he did say he thought he was going to win, which is an entirely normal thing for a candidate to say.
But it may take a little longer, as I've said all along. It's not my place or Donald Trump's place to declare who's won this election. That's the decision of the American people.
But what he said is, I don't get to decide who won. Donald Trump doesn't get to decide who won. The voters decide, so let's count the votes. The big pushback right now is count the votes and let's see where this election is. And we're hearing that quite a lot from the international community too, as Wednesday evolves here, that's the chorus, is that the votes are going to tell us who won.
And a big story in 2016's election was how the polls got it so wrong that they underestimated Trump's support. And it looks like, at least in some states, they are wrong again. States like Iowa, Ohio, Florida, Texas. They were polling close between Biden and Trump for months. All of those states ended up going red. And in some cases, it wasn't even all that close. You've reported on the ground from many of these battleground states. You've been to Texas, North Carolina, Georgia. How do you square what the polls were reflecting and what you actually saw and reported on?
They are off significantly this year. All the votes aren't counted yet. We are seeing sort of Biden wave in some of these mail ballots that are reporting late and all of that. But at the same time, it sure doesn't look like Biden. He's likely to win the popular vote, it appears right now, but he's not going to win it by 8 or 9 points. He was not competitive as he was thought to be maybe in Texas. Ohio, although again, the late vote is mail-in votes, but we're talking they're off significantly there. And so the polling error this year is much bigger. And that's something the polling industry is going to have to reckon with or whatever, or maybe media people are going to have to reckon with their reliance on polls in the lead up to things. The truth is, though, that is on the ground reporting doesn't give you a lot of insight into polling and polling error. I mean, if polls were off in Texas, I can tell you they were a lot closer than my visit to Houston, where I talked to a random people I walked up to on the street. Houston is a very Democratic area. I still met Trump supporters. You get sort of qualitative data from on the ground reporting. I don't think that actually it provides much insight into what happens in big number polling.
You're still talking to people on a one-to-one basis versus, obviously these polls are conducted at a statewide level.
Yeah, and a nationwide level. And the thing is that there's a famous sort of thing where like people are like, everybody I know voted for Biden, or everybody I know voted for Trump. So obviously these polls are wrong. We're all in bubbles, and even reporters attempt to break out of bubbles and go to places and talk to people to try and get more of a sense of the cross-section. But it doesn't give you, even still, an accurate picture of the kind of the aggregate, right? The question here is that polls are supposed to give you that accurate picture of the aggregate. I said qualitative data before. I mean, that's quantitative data that's supposed to be patched with it. We didn't see quite that same confidence in the projections this year. Most of the people who try to predict what's going to happen had basically said, there's an outside chance of a landslide, but really what's probably going to happen is we're not going to know on election night. It's going to come down to Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin. And guess what? That's where we are. This is 2 major elections in a row where everybody's going to remember that they got it substantially wrong in key places. And I don't know what that means going forward for the polling industry or for the way that people react to it and the way maybe we in the media use polls to guide our reporting or to inform our reporting.
Yeah, the ground is not quite certain as it used to be. We keep in mind that as Canadians, this is not our election. We don't have a say, but so much of your reporting, Ed, and especially our conversations on this podcast, is about making sense of what's happening for Canadians and the many ways that it impacts us. I know Canadians are wondering this today, later this week too. What in the world is going on? What should Canadians know about the state of what's happening in the US right now?
It's a difficult question. I mean, I think like everybody else, Canadians need to take a deep breath and have some patience while the votes are counted. And maybe the Canadian government in particular, to the extent that it has influence in the international community. I know European governments are doing the same thing. If it looks like there's a further attempt to end the vote counting or to delegitimize the democratic result of this election, I think that might be a time where the international community, including Canada, has to sort of make it be known that that doesn't wash with them, that they disapprove of that. We've talked quite a bit before about what hangs in the balance for Canada, and there are quite a lot of items that will be affected in Canada by this American election. That's the case for people around the world, where this massive superpower in an election where it's going to pursue one of 2 probably very different paths is going to have wide-ranging impacts on Canadians and on people around the world. And there's a sense of helplessness right now. For once, many Americans have that same sense of helplessness because they've already voted, and now they just got to watch how the process plays out. But I think potentially foreign governments, including Canada's, might have a role to play in speaking up if it looks like that process is going sideways. But, as of right now, they're counting the ballots. We don't quite know what the results are. We just got to kind of wait on it.
Ed, thank you as always for your reporting, and your work is not done. It might just be beginning.
Yeah, that's true. It's I don't even think there's an attributed curse, right? May you live in interesting times. And there's a journalist curse of like, may you cover fascinating stories, because it's great stories. There's lots to cover, but there's not a lot of sleep involved. And so I'll just keep drinking my coffee.
We will talk to you soon. That's Ed Keenan, the Toronto Star's Washington Bureau Chief. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. This Matters is hosted and produced by me, Adrian Cheung, Saba Aitazaz, and Raju Mudhar. Produced and mixed by Sean Pattinen, and our director of programming is JP Fozo. Our show theme music is by So Called, and our episode music is by Mike DeAngelis. We want to hear what stories matter to you. Please send us comments, questions, or ideas to thismatters@thestar.ca. Please consider supporting the journalism the Toronto Star newsroom does at thestar.com. And don't forget to subscribe to This Matters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Let's talk soon.